Structure and functions of the U.S. government. The political system of the U.S. is a federal presidential republic that consists of 50 states, and the Federal District of Columbia consists of 50 states. Congress is the highest legislative body and is separated into the House of Representatives and the Senate. The President embodies executive power and is the head of the government, the state, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. The current paper examines Congress and the office of the President. It also discusses how the activities of these two branches of the government compare with the initial intentions of the U.S. founders. Since the President is the head of the state and the government, his powers are different from those of Congress. According to the U.S. Constitution, the President is the executive authority, the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Navy, Armed Forces, and militia of some states. The Constitution empowers the head of the country to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur, and appoint ministers, ambassadors, consuls, and judges of the Supreme Court. Since 1787, when the Constitutional Convention was invented, the President was granted more power. In different historical periods, it was presidents who decided on issues of foreign policy. Besides, the invention of new communication technologies has also facilitated the strengthening and expansion of presidential power. Congress, in its part, represents a legislative branch of the government. Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution enables it to make laws, declare wars, impeach federal officers, endorse presidential appointments, borrow money from other nations on behalf of the U.S., and lay taxes and collect them. As already mentioned, Congress consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate, which are the two chambers of this lawmaking body. Congress possesses enumerated, implied, and inherent powers granted by the Constitution. The Senate and the House are responsible for lawmaking in the different spheres. For instance, the House is in charge of education, labor, homeland security, and House administration, while the Senate does not have committees for these issues. However, the latter includes boards for urban affairs, science, transportation, and environment and public works. Both chambers are answerable for the budget, finance, agriculture, foreign affairs, appropriations, and armed services. In sum, 535 officials are elected for the work in Congress, 100 members belong to the Senate, and the rest 435, to the House. The Senate is headed by the Majority Leader, while the head of the House is the Speaker, who, in most cases, presides over the majority party. Currently, Republican Mitch McConnell heads the Senate, and Democrat Nancy Pelosi, the House of Representatives. In order not to let the national government have too much power, it was separated into three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. As stated in the paragraphs above, the President performs executive duties, Congress, legislative, and the Supreme Court, judicial ones. Such a separation represents the system of checks and balances in the government. Congress has a lawmaking function, however, it is only in the power of the Supreme Court to enforce laws and try cases arising under federal law. From this, it could be inferred that Congress is permitted to pass laws, but the President has the ability to veto possible legislation so that it cannot turn into law. For example, on May 6, 2020, U.S. President Donald Trump vetoed the Iran War Powers Resolution, which was aimed at the termination of the usage of American military forces against this nation. Bills become rights as the result of the classic legislative process, which includes such stages as making a draft, several rounds of debates and amendments, committee work, final approval, and publication. A bill is discussed in the appropriate committees. Then it is submitted to the floor of the chamber where it could be either voted down or passed. In the latter case, a bill undergoes one more round of debates and voting. Finally, the two chambers have to adopt their collective vision of a future law. Therefore, a bill passes through numerous criticisms and changes so that the final act suits the visions of representatives of different social groups and political parties. Finally, the answer to the question of whether the current activities of the President and Congress suit the initial beliefs of the Founding Fathers of the U.S. is definite. According to Paul, Washington, Jefferson, Hamilton, and Franklin were afraid that the overweening grasp of the state could pose a danger to the rights of the citizens. They wanted the government to be limited in power through a system of checks and balances. The separation of the government into three branches represents such a framework within which Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court are obliged to consider each other's opinions. Apart from the examples mentioned above, numerous cases illustrate the actual work of the system of checks and balances. For instance, 4 years ago, ex-President Obama vetoed the ability of 9/11 victims to file a lawsuit against Saudi Arabia. However, a 2/3 vote in Congress allowed to override this prohibition. Consequently, the government cannot indeed seize power since it is divided among the three branches.